It's my blessing and honor again to be here to present another of our Legacy Awards. We've honored Sister Paula Vandegeer with our Legacy Award from the 1970s, Sister Paula. We've honored Ann and Jimmy Pearson with our Legacy Award from the 80s. Did you see a lot of pictures of yourselves, Ann and Jimmy, from the 90s as well? And Sister Paula, with you were all over that too in the 80s and 90s. But now I want to introduce to you the person that we believe is, again, in a sense, a no-brainer for our Legacy Award for the 90s. Do we have our, there we go, with our award. And that person is Tom Glessner. We'll bring him up in a minute. Tom is one of our most distinguished Legacy Award winners in terms of credentials. He graduated from University of Washington School of Law in 1977, and he practiced law in Seattle area for 10 years. As a practicing attorney, he used his legal skills to represent and counsel pro-life organizations, including pregnancy help centers. And he founded and led 4 pregnancy help centers in Seattle, Washington from 1981 to 87. Tom was the chairman of the board, and his wife, Laura, was the executive director. And he was president and CEO of the Christian Action Council, which is now called CareNet, from 1987 to 1992, where he established legal guidelines and programs for training of hundreds of board members and directors of pregnancy centers across the nation. And currently, he's on the board of directors for the Washington State Family Policy Institute and the board of directors for the National Religious Pro-Life Coalition. In 1993, now we're talking about the 90s, Tom was led to found NIFLA, the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, which is committed to legal counsel and training for pregnancy resource centers. Tom was founding NIFLA at almost the exact same time that I became president of Heartbeat International. And we got together thanks to a good friend who said, you need to meet each other, and realized the synergy that we could have together, NIFLA and Heartbeat International, with NIFLA focusing in specifically on the legal issues and Heartbeat focusing in on our training and resources for those of you in this movement. So we actually joined each other's boards. I became a member of the NIFLA board. Tom became a member of the Heartbeat International board. And we had that very, very close relationship for at least 6 or 7 years, at which time was a very formative stage for both Heartbeat and for NIFLA. And Tom, your expertise, your input, your heart for this work was a definite influence in the foundations of Heartbeat International. But the reason we are singling out Tom primarily for this award in the 1990s, not only his contribution to the formation of NIFLA and to the formation of Heartbeat, but Tom was the person who single-handedly in those days gave us the vision for the medical clinic, gave us the vision for using ultrasound in our pregnancy help movement. And that was a very revolutionary idea. You remember as we talked in the 1970s, we were called emergency pregnancy centers. In the 1980s, we got into the AA and the AAA centers. And we realized through Ann and Jimmy's influence, we were zeroing in not only on emergency pregnancy, but also on life care and formation. Well, at the end of the 80s, we came into a period of attack from guess who? Our same old friends, NARAL and Planned Parenthood, who are attacking us today, actually started these attacks in the 1980s, in the late 80s. And you know what they said about us? They said we were fake clinics, okay? Well, they're still saying that today, unfortunately. But fortunately today, we are real clinics. And that is due to almost single-handedly Tom Glessner. It was Tom's vision to bring the ultrasound into the pregnancy help centers, to convert pregnancy centers into medical clinics, and he pioneered this. Tom, you had a lot of naysayers in those early days, didn't you? People saying, well, certainly pregnancy centers can't do this and won't do this, and it's certainly, it's not going to be a vision for everybody, and of course it isn't a vision for everybody. But now we have about 700, we believe, pregnancy help medical clinics, and that ultrasound is the primary primary tool now being used to save lives in our pregnancy help centers. Tom realized that he read an article which talked about the bonding. Now, this was from regular medical journals, talked about the bonding that occurs when a mother sees her baby on the ultrasound screen. And Tom realized that the bonding is what was lacking. In our pregnancy centers, we could talk to women about the facts. You know, we could show them pictures sometimes, but that was somebody else's baby because they were zeroed in on themselves, and rightly so, they were in crisis. So what could break through those walls and barriers? What could help them to bond with their baby? And Tom recognized that was the ultrasound. So he researched how we could do this legally, of course, as the lawyer, legally and legitimately, and follow good medical standards of care. So I was involved every step of the way as a member of the NIFLA board. I heard him coming and talking and presenting these ideas, showing us the guidelines from the AIUM and the articles from the CDC, and he put it all together. And I was convinced our pregnancy center here in Columbus was one of the first 3 or 4 pregnancy centers in the country to purchase an ultrasound and to become a medical clinic, to add medical services. And I believed in his vision, and I still believe in it. And I think there's no question. Tom, of course, is a great partner with Heartbeat now in center defense as well. And many of you were in his center defense workshop. But in terms of his contribution to our movement, Tom's legacy will certainly be to the next generation the use of the ultrasound in saving and changing lives. So I present to you Tom Glessner for our 1990s Legacy Award.
Yeah, they're up there. You covered them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, good. Congratulations, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm deeply honored to receive this award today. Thank you to Peggy Hartshorn, to the staff of Heartbeat International for this very undeserved honor. The fact of the matter is that the true heroes of this movement are you people sitting out here today listening to me right now. You're all on the front lines of this great movement ordained by God that is saving lives and building a culture of life in our nation. You're my heroes. You really are. You know, President Ronald Reagan was once asked to write a letter for a time capsule that was to be opened in 100 years. And he was asked to, in this letter, to describe the kind of society he lived in, the kind of culture he lived in. And in his letter, he referenced the great potential for annihilation through a nuclear war. And he emphasized the great challenge to make sure that those nuclear bombs never leave their silos. Well, imagine, if you will, you're given this same assignment. What would you write? I think all of us would write about the great blessings we enjoy as Americans, our children, our grandchildren, the Little League games we go to, the high school football games, the proms our kids go to, our spouses, our honeymoon, our weddings, all the wonderful things that God has blessed us with, we'd put in that letter. But I know that all of us would also write about this tragic time in American history where human life is degraded and cheapened. We would write about the terrible tragedy of abortion on demand. And we would also write about the hope that this movement offers to women in crisis, the hope that gives them life, or gives them the ability to choose life for themselves, spiritual life for themselves and for their unborn child. You know, President Reagan understood that the future readers of his letter would know whether, in fact, those missiles had been fired. But then he pondered a little bit and he thought, well, maybe that's not the case, because if we fail in our mission and the missiles are launched, there may be nobody around to open the time capsule. We've been given a great mission. It is a mission unparalleled in history. We have been chosen. We have been chosen to reverse the madness of this nation's march towards a brave new world where life is manipulated, destroyed, killed for the selfish gains of others. And we're on a mission to reestablish in this nation again the biblical foundation on which we're founded, the biblical foundation that says every human being, born, unborn, every human being, no matter a condition of dependency, the infirm, the elderly, the dying, every little boy, every little girl, despite color, despite gender, every human being is made in the image of God, and as such is afforded that fundamental biblical right of life. Will we accomplish this mission? You know, those who open the time capsule 100 years from now will know if we've succeeded, or perhaps they won't know. For if we fail, the God who made us all will respond. Let us soberly remember the words of Thomas Jefferson written on the wall of the Jefferson Monument when he said this: "I tremble in fear for my country when I realize that God is just and his justice will not sleep forever." Jefferson was referencing slavery. And history tells us that God's justice did not remain silent. On the wall of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., are the great words of President Lincoln's second inaugural address as he acknowledges that great conflict that killed 700,000 lives was God's judgment on our nation for the institution of slavery. And indeed, where I come from now, Fredericksburg, Virginia, the reminders of this judgment are all around us. Close to my home is the wilderness battlefield that my wife and I love to attend and walk our dogs sometimes. And we get out there and we sometimes sit on a park bench and eat a lunch and breathe in the air. And my imagination just kind of flows back to that time. There was a great battle, the wilderness battle, and it was a time period where a gunshot was fired every 7 seconds. And you can imagine the crack of the rifles and the explosions of the cannons. And then the forest caught fire. The forest caught fire. And each side, the north and the south, could not get the wounded out in time for the evening. And so in the evening, both camps would hear the screaming of the men being burned to death, the wounded who were left there. Indeed, the judgment of God is fierce when it comes, and I tremble for my country when I see what the future holds for any nation that mocks God, spits in his face, and denies the image of God in those he's created. If we fail in this mission, a just God will call our nation to account for the deaths of more than 53 million unborn children. Always remember who you are and whose you are. Always remember, never take your eyes off our captain, who captains this ship and paid a heavy price for your redemption. Never let discouragement deter you from this great task before us. And always remember that the end of this journey we're all on await these words: "Well done, my good and faithful servant." It is the highest honor that I have to serve in this movement with you as your friend, as your co-laborer, as your colleague, and as your fellow bondservant of Jesus Christ. Thank you.